Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really crucial piece of research from Qorrect titled Learning Outcomes Assessment in Universities. Look, as we step into 2026, higher education is at a massive turning point. We are rapidly moving way beyond those traditional A through S grading systems we all grew up with. So consider this explainer your critical guide to understanding exactly how, and more importantly, why, that shift is happening right now.
Okay, let's dive into this. Are your students actually learning? I know, it sounds like a totally simple question, right? But it actually represents the core friction in universities today. There is this vast, kind of hidden gap between a student simply sitting in a lecture hall absorbing a PowerPoint and that student actually proving they've mastered a competency. Because let's be honest, just because academic content was taught definitely does not guarantee it was actually learned.
To unpack how institutions are fixing this, here's our roadmap. We're going to cover 1. Defining learning outcomes assessment. 2. Why learning assessment matters. 3. Types of academic assessment. 4. Connecting outcomes and assessment. And 5. Powering assessment with Qorrect. All right, Section 1. Defining learning outcomes assessment. Let's get right into the core concepts.
So what is learning outcomes assessment? Well, it's the process of measuring how students achieve the knowledge, skills, and competencies defined by educational institutions. The phrase I really want you to circle here is measurable educational results. This completely takes the spotlight off of what professors are just broadcasting at the front of the room and shines it directly onto what students are actually absorbing and retaining.
And this brings us to a really vital distinction: delivering content versus achieving competency. A modern university can no longer just act as a conveyor belt for academic content. Hand out a letter grade and call it a day. No way. They have to definitively prove student achievement through demonstrated skills. Moving on to Section 2, Why Learning Assessment Matters. What are the actual stakes for universities here? The benefits of getting this right are absolutely massive for things like improving academic quality and enhancing student success. But the absolute grounding anchor here, that would be supporting accreditation requirements. Accrediting bodies do not want guesswork anymore. They demand hard, measurable evidence to prove that your institutional planning is being driven by actual data. There's a quote from the source material that drives this reality home perfectly. It says, "Today's universities are expected to prove measurable educational quality and continuous academic improvement." That word, prove, is literally doing all the heavy lifting there. Accountability is no longer optional for anyone. All right, Section 3, Types of Academic Assessment. Now, what's really interesting about this next section is how we actually measure all this data. Let's run through them.
First up, we've got formative versus summative assessment. Think of it like cooking. Formative assessment is when the chef tastes the soup during the cooking process. It's that ongoing feedback you need to monitor progress. Summative assessment is when the soup is finally served to the guest at the very end. It's the final evaluation of the overall achievement.
Next up is direct versus indirect. Direct assessment measures actual, tangible student performance. We're talking your exams, your research projects, your practical tasks. Indirect assessment, on the flip side, gathers feedback on the learning experience itself. Think student surveys, interviews, and course evaluations. And finally, diagnostic versus performance-based. Diagnostic is basically your starting line. It's how we identify learning gaps before the instruction even begins. Contrast that with performance-based assessment, which tests practical application through real-world, hands-on problem solving. Okay, Section 4, Connecting Outcomes and Assessment. Let's transition here and turn all this academic philosophy into a tangible methodology. And this brilliantly illustrates how curriculum alignment actually works in practice. It's a clear, sequential relationship. Step 1, you define your specific learning outcomes. Step 2, you perfectly align your course content, teaching methods, and exams to those exact outcomes. And then Step 3, you analyze the resulting data to pinpoint any lingering learning gaps. When your assessments are perfectly aligned with your outcomes, it's a real game changer. Grading becomes incredibly objective and standardized across entire departments, which vastly enhances fairness for the students. And for the institution, it provides the hard data required to confidently monitor educational effectiveness and continuously improve. Which brings us to Section 5, Powering Assessment with Qorrect. Let's see how this builds into real-world application, taking us from theory to a digital solution. Listen, the only way to handle the sheer volume of data required for all of this is through the transition to centralized, data-driven evaluation methods. And this is exactly where the Qorrect platform steps in. It serves as the central hub that's absolutely necessary to modernize this entire academic quality assurance process.
These features directly solve the exact problems we've been discussing. Centralized management basically unifies the whole campus. It allows professors to directly align their exam questions to specific academic outcomes. Plus, it provides advanced analytics to spot learning gaps in real time, and it vastly simplifies accreditation documentation by keeping all your evidence organized in one secure place. Let's anchor this back to the day-to-day reality for faculty, because this is huge. Automating grading for objective questions drastically reduces manual workload. We're talking about the end of those dreaded weekend grading marathons. It saves an immense amount of time, eliminates subjective bias, and it finally frees educators up to actually focus on addressing the learning gaps that the data reveals. So, what does this all mean? The crucial point is this. Tracking measurable educational results is no longer the future of higher education. It is the immediate present. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative question for university leaders to reflect on. Is your university ready for data-driven assessment? Are you prepared to prove continuous, automated academic improvement? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.